setup, delivery, punchline. The one, two, three. That hasn't changed since time immemorial. That hasn't changed since some, uh, uh, comic in the Middle Ages put a bowl in front of his feet during market day and did 10 minutes on the rising price of turnips. So, what resilience means is life is all about the long haul. And I didn't really know what I was doing or really was totally confident in my own skin up there until I had a good 7 to 10 years on that stage. It really makes a difference. Stage time, stage time, stage time. That's what Carlin said.
Your word for this episode was resilience. What made you choose that?
Well, I'm celebrating my 25th year playing soft seat theaters in Canada. And I had 5 years in the clubs prior to that. And then 17 years prior to that as an actor. I started in Second City in the early 80s
Yeah.
with an awful lot of ups and downs. But stand up, when I finally answered that calling after coming back from Los Angeles in 93 and writing a one-man show about my time down there called Up and Down in Shaky Town, one man's journey through the California dream. I took the best 10 minutes from that 1 hour solo turn and started doing amateur night again, and uh, I understood that just because you might have had success as an actor or in films or commercials, it didn't matter. Once you're in front of that microphone, it's a whole different ball of wax. And I really dedicated myself to the structure of the form, mind you, because I started in Second City. I never had those
Mm.
wobbly stage legs that so many people have to have. I was on main stage for 5 years and then in the organization for 10, doing corporate work and everything else. So I had that, but even though it's different sides of the same coin, the coin being laughter, it's uh, it's a totally different experience. And
Hmm.
I said as much in my book. I wrote a book during COVID that became a bestseller and was shortlisted for the Stephen Leacock Humor Awards, which I was very proud of. So I was able to give my fans and the average reader um, a um, a look at what it takes to build a career 1 kilometer and 1 gig at a time in a country that's so close to the U.S. border. We're looking up Lady Liberty's skirt.
And you're doing that like in a time before you had, like, I feel like comedians now have such an advantage with social media where we can build a following and then confidently go into these markets and know that they're going to be reasonably sold out. There's a little bit more of like
Reasonably sold out. You're talking about clubs?
clubs, let's say, or
Yeah, you're not talking
you're putting
about the
on your own
Wooster
shows.
Center with
Not
2,000
talking about
people.
theaters. No, no, I'm talking about like somebody who's going from I have a day job and I'm doing comedy to I want to only do comedy. Do you know what I mean? Like now those people can build a social media following and then know when it's comfortably time to get out of that day job. Where someone like yourself, you just had to like be resilient and hope that this is all going to work out, you know?
Well, your comment opens a door on a lot of things for me. I turned 66 this year, and my peers or my mentors were 10 years my junior when I didn't start stand up till later. I think I was 36
Mm.
at then the Laugh Resort. And what was great about working there, I could stand at the back of the room after I opened for Ray Romano, Louis C.K., Dennis Goldberg, Rich Hall, or any of the wonderful stand-ups we had in Canada in those days, from Barry Kennedy to Tim Steeves to Mark Farrell. And I watch these guys at the back of the room. And what galls me to no fucking end are young aspiring comedians who don't watch the pros. it's like they have all the answers. Just because you've got a 10-minute TikTok video means squat. And and I'm not saying that people who've had a lot of time in the business as a stand-up need to be deified. It's more than just a social club, you know.
Hmm.
It's more than just stepping off the stage and getting pats on the back by your pals who say it's a good set, right? And I've noticed too, not with all, but with some, that there's a great lack of structure.
Mm.
You know, set up, delivery, punchline, the one,
Yeah.
two, three. That
Yeah.
hasn't changed since time immemorial. That hasn't changed since some, uh, uh, comic in the Middle Ages put a bowl in front of his feet during market day and did 10 minutes on the rising price of turnips.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, what resilience means is life is all about the long haul. And I didn't really know what I was doing or really was totally confident in my own skin up there until
Hmm.
I had a good 7 to 10 years on that stage. It really makes a difference. Stage time, stage time, stage time. That's what Carlin said. And in light of your comment about saying that you can be sold out because you can nurture an audience on social media, that's a fucking shortcut, man.
Of course. Of
It's a
course. Yeah. Yeah.
shortcut, and
Yeah.
and it's a ruse. It's
Yeah.
the ruse of social media that somehow being and granted, some have caught lightning in a bottle. I won't negate that,
Hmm.
but it's like the old days that I see you've got Steve Martin's album behind you, and Born Standing Up, his book on stand up, is the best ever written,
It's
and
great.
it hands down. But
Yeah.
everybody thought in my day that a set on Carson led to fortune and fame,
Hmm.
and I think that fallacy is nurtured today too with social media. When we get the dopamine hit of uh, 800 likes for something you've done in your living room or your garage or wherever.
Of
But
course. Yeah.
Steve Martin in that book said, uh, I was on Johnny Carson 14 times. Carson blackballed him too. He didn't like what he did one time. He was doing some kind of uh, avant-garde, not avant-garde, but it just wasn't clicking. It was a little
Hmm.
experimental for Johnny's tastes. And then I think that was about 18 months or 2 years. He didn't get on. And Martin says that that wasn't the case. You didn't get famous right away. And then when he finally did have that 14th killer set on Carson, he goes in to buy a pack of gum at a corner store after he went into the Los Angeles Art Gallery or something, spent an afternoon.
Hmm.
And the lady behind the counter says, were you that young man I saw on Johnny Carson last night? And he says, you know, with pride, right? And confidence, because he killed, yes, I am. And she looks at him and says, you're not funny at all. So I think that those who figure they have the answers aren't respectful of the form. And it's
Hmm.
not about camaraderie is wonderful. And I think that because there's no star system in Canada, there's less, it's far less a cutthroat experience. I'm just assuming anyway. I think that New York, for the most part, is very supportive, from what I heard from Nathan McIntosh, but you still had to kill. There's no
Yeah.
shortcut.
Yeah. Yeah. No, you
There's no
still have to show
shortcuts
up
at the
and be
Comedy
good.
Cellar.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
um, yeah, so uh, I think uh, comedians uh, coming into their own today, it would be prudent to um, it would be prudent to be your own worst critic, and
Oh.
that when you have a crappy set, you better wear it, right? You have to wear a shitty set, and it has to affect you on a primal level. And you have to watch your tapes if you're taping it or if you're recording it, and go home and be ruthlessly honest with your content.
Mm-hmm.
It's not it's not about getting the support of your peers. It's being able to kill in any room you walk into, regardless of where you are. That's a professional.
Yeah. That was one of the reasons too why I had also slowed down on doing open mics, because I felt like I was sort of like getting a bad habit of trying to make just the back of the room laugh.
Well, of course you will. Of course you
And
will. That's why I don't do them. My buddy Pete
yeah.
Zedbacher in the Snowden tour, when he was writing for my show back in 2014, he would go out and do these amateur nights and work on his material. And he came in one day and he said, Ronnie, he said, these kids don't stay to watch you. They're off to the next gig. How arrogant is that? How it's disrespectful of the form.
Although
I have a
I
summer place in Nova Scotia that's outside Lunenburg.
mhm.
25-year-old guys wanting to talk to 85-year-old boat builders as to how to bend hemlock for a bow. When I was a kid at Second City, and Joe Flaherty, God bless him, would hire me for sketches on Second City. Um, you just you had to earn yourself a seat at that table.
Mhm. Of
You had to
course.
do your job. You had to get the job done right. And
Yeah.
I don't know if club owners are telling aspiring comedians to do the job right, and
There
to
are
pull back
people
on
like
this and throw
Howard,
that and the other thing. Who?
Howard from Yuck Yucks, Howard
Oh, he's the
Wagman.
best.
He
He's the best.
he is constantly on the
He's the
Facebook
best.
group saying, "Come watch this comedian. This is a comedian you should come watch. Just come here, hang out,
I
watch this
did two shows
comedian."
there last summer. First time I played a club in 25 years. And I did 100 minutes each night. My live shows on the road are 2 hours
Wow.
without a break. And I like to come in with, well, at least anywhere between 40 to 50% new material each tour. Every 2 years, I do the country. I do it in its entirety.
How do you
And
prepare for that?
pardon me,
How do you prepare for that?
I just memorize it. I go from the page to the stage.
Mm.
And because I had improv skills in earlier stages of my career, I'm not afraid of the dead space when
Like
that happens.
losing your spot and then finding your way
Yeah,
back
yeah,
to it.
yeah. That's
Yeah,
fun because
yeah,
then you find stuff. It's like the great Canadian comedian Mike Wilmot says.
yeah.
That's when you think something's going to kill and it doesn't, but you're still up there swinging for the fences. That's when the gold dust, the little fine gold dust lands. And I can remember early days at the Laugh Resort when I was working on a new piece, and I have definitive memories of finding crucial links to hold a piece together, that adhesive,
Hmm.
uh, because pressure creates diamonds, and that's very important to keep that in mind. And
Yeah.
another thing about the clubs too, I mean, I like to get political. I'm surprised how in urban centers, club audiences are uninformed or don't care. I find that they're
Yeah.
talking about the same subjects all the time. But to get back to Howard, last summer I did two shows, right?
Hmm.
Said to me afterwards, and that I got standing ovations after both shows, and I sold my book there, and I had really great sets, and it was wonderful to play a club again. And he said, and one comedian came to watch me, one
Mm.
of all the people that worked there, one.
Wow.
And uh, I said, and he said, I'm sorry. I said, why? He goes, nobody watches people anymore. My buddy who I write with, Chris Finn, wrote with Mercer for 17 years, was a comedian for 10, came up with Brent Butt and McDonald and both McDonald's and Jeremy Hotz. Just besides being an exemplary comedian, a no bullshit human being who understands what it means to be proficient at your craft.
Hmm.
So I forget who he was with, but it was when the Rivoli was still open, and they were him. I forget who was with him, but all of a sudden, Danny Boy comes up on stage. The word goes out that Danny Boy is here. Okay, 8 comedians on the club that night. Not one of those kids stayed to watch one of the best comedians working today. Not one.
It's crazy.
Not one. And when they said that to Lauren Perlmutter, he said, they just do that. That's what it is now.
Yeah, and if I could play devil's
Why is that?
advocate,
I mean,
if I could play
why
devil's
is that?
advocate, I'll steel man the argument from the other side, just to, for the audience sake as well. I don't want to ever assume that it's just purely based out of ignorance, and I think a
I didn't say
majority,
ignorance. I just
no,
said a lack of
arrogance,
respect for the
arrogance,
ones. Yeah, ignorance
yeah,
is different.
arrogance is what you said.
Yeah,
Sorry.
yeah, yeah.
What I think it is a lot of the younger comics, like I've been doing this since I was 19. So, and I'm
How old are you
32,
now?
32.
32. Yeah,
So when I started, like I had people telling me early on, to watch the comics, and I naturally just wanted to. I was a fan of comedy. I
sure.
wanted to watch the people that were really good at it, and not even necessarily watching them with the intention of gaining something from watching them or trying to pick apart their, just enjoying it, just watching it, right? So then when I got more technical with my comedy and was trying to write better jokes, that's when I was paying attention to those comics and seeing
Yes.
how they set things up, how they talked about certain things. But I think now there's this like anxiety that you're falling behind against your fellow because of social media. Everyone has numbers now attached to their profile. So if you aren't doing as many sets as that person, then you feel like you're falling behind, or you're not as good, or you're getting worse. You don't have enough practice. But what they're failing to realize is that you could do one spot that night and then watch a comic that's been a professional for the last 20 years, and they're going to give you way more
What a
knowledge
shame. What
than
a
those
shame.
two other open mics. Like I
Oh,
agree with you, but
what
I
a
think it's
shame, man.
coming from an anxiety of falling behind sort of dilemma more than an arrogance of, I'm sure there's those people. There's definitely
Look,
those
bro,
people who are like,
life is all
I'm
about the
on.
long haul. You
Yeah,
know, the first
exactly.
hammer a carpenter picks up, he doesn't build a mansion. He's got to hit his thumb a few times first. And which is why I finally bought the birdhouse. It's just it 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 should be uh it should be a dictate. And that's not to say that everybody you watch you're going to agree with, or everybody you watch is going to be you'll have an epiphany. But
Hmm.
I watched the guys who I worked with too. I watched Tim Steves, I watched Barry Kennedy, I watched Mark Farrell, I watched Simon Rakoff, I watched Mike McDonald, right? And I mean, to see Mike in his early days, in the early 80s, when he was the Promethean fire afoot, was truly remarkable. But truly remarkable to see him at the top of his game.
And he's so humble. I had him on the podcast, and
He's a beautiful guy.
I tried asking him on the podcast of like, what was it like to win like best stand-up comic 2 years in a row? And he goes, "Oh, no, 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 I don't think I won that. No, no, no. I think it was for swimming. It was for swimming that I won the award." Like he just refused. He goes,
Well, he
shut
was
up. Let's
certainly
move
kind
on.
to me in the days I started breaking in and playing the independent club at that time. It was really run really well. It was Rumors out in Winnipeg.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember I was out there, and I was a greenhorn. I'd just been in country for 3 years, I think. And I asked Mike to watch my set. And you had a laugh like that from the back of the room, right?
Yeah.
And he gave me 2.5 hours of notes, Johnny.
Wow.
And listen, and they weren't sugarcoated either. I mean, he brought the scalpel out when he had to. And he was blunt with me too. He said, "Look, you're dropping the F word too much. Don't do
Hmm.
that, because it negates it negates the intelligence that you want to achieve with a future piece.
I think
And
Seinfeld said that too. He was like, if you swear, it's because you couldn't think of a better word to say there.
absolutely,
It's like the
absolutely.
lowest thing that you could go for. Yeah.
And uh, when I see it used excessively, it's just lazy. It's lazy. I mean,
Mhm.
sometimes when you're working a new bit in, it slips in. And some people can get away with it, right? Like Billy Connolly, it just seemed to be um, it just seemed to be encoded in his DNA,
Mhm.
right in the early days of Pryor and things. But when I went to the Comedy Cellar several years ago, and which is Nathan McIntosh, which I think is one of Canada's best exports over the last
The
15 years.
best. His special
I
Money Never Wakes, it like blew me away. So good. I haven't watched
haven't
Down with.
seen it yet. I'm going to watch it. I got a couple days off. I'm in
Well,
Kelowna now.
he's got
But
another
I get
new
his,
one out.
pardon me?
He's got another new one out called Down with
The
Tech.
new one
Yeah,
about tech. Yeah,
yeah.
that's the
Yeah,
one I'm
yeah.
watching.
I
But
love
I did
that.
his series in Nova Scotia for Five called Trapped. And John Doyle, who didn't cut anybody any slack, said that there wasn't a word wasted in Nathan's script.
Wow.
And, I got a nice acknowledgement too, because Nathan wrote a great part for me. And I know how tough it is to get it right. And there's a guy who sweats the joke. Do you sweat the joke? Right?
Mhm.
I mean, he used this phrase that he said he was on stage in Winnipeg. I think it was the Winnipeg Comedy Festival several years ago, and this guy gets up on stage and just fucking bombs. To use the phrase, which he was eating his own dick,
Yeah,
right?
yeah, yeah.
Just and after the festival, after the filming, there he was, happy as a clam, partying with everybody. And um, he said, why wasn't he racked with angst? I had a bad set at the Winnipeg Comedy Fest. It was a thematically structured one. I remember I had the flu on the road and I wasn't really able to get it together. And it was between I think I did it between my first and second special. My first special was The Road Between My Ears at the Winter Garden, and the second one was uh, Quest for the West. And that's where it's really important to have, for me anyway, to have control of your pre-show game face,
Hmm.
right? I mean, I weathered that crucible at Just for Laughs where you've got 10 comedians stuck in a room pacing like, cats in a cage, getting ready to do your 8 minutes
Yeah.
with people from all around the world at different levels of proficiency. As you go through that crucible and it's necessary. And I think this might have been in 2000 and when did I do Quest for the West? 2006. So I think it was 2006. And I couldn't lock my set in, and they said, "Would you like to use a monitor?" I said, "Sure." And it was awful.
Mm.
It was a terrible set. And I made a promise to myself that I would only work where I could control my own environment and my own pre-show game face, that I could lock and load on my terms. And so now, for the last 25 years on the road, it's me alone in my dressing room with my notes listed from end to end, my 75 pages of show and my Red Bull. So
Yeah.
I'll place that. It's
That's
so
your
important.
rider.
Granted, if you're only doing 10 minutes, you can, 10 or 20 minutes, that's not a problem to sit in a room with other comedians. But I don't I like the quiet. I like to be able to focus.
Yeah, no, I totally get that. I heard Barry Katz was talking about doing a show where his first client was Louis CK, and he was doing a show where he had Louis opening for Seinfeld at some like small kind of like restaurant thing. And he was so excited to meet Seinfeld. It was like the first time he was going to meet him. And people are coming into the room, and Seinfeld gestures him over, and he goes over to him, and Seinfeld is just so like serious, and he's like, "It's 8 o'clock." And he's like, "Yeah, we're just waiting for people to come in, and then Louis is going to go on." And then he goes, "No, no, no, that's his job. Put him on now. The show is starting now. His job is to go on while the people are coming in, and then he can bring me up." And he's like, "Oh, okay, I'll go get him to do this." And he tells Louis, and Louis doesn't want to do it. And then Louis ends up going on and doing it, and then bringing Seinfeld on. And Seinfeld then crushes for like 90 minutes. And then after he's thinking like, "Oh, my career's done. Like Seinfeld was mad at me that I didn't start the show and I didn't whatever." And then Seinfeld looks over at him, calls him Barry, and he's smiling ear to ear. He's like, "Come on, come over, sit down." And then he's like, "That's when I realized that like he had just put his game face on. Like he was gearing up to do 90 minutes. He didn't have
And,
time to be
and he
like,
called Barry over
yeah,
because Barry earned his seat at the table.
exactly."
And he earned his seat at the table. And I think at the end of the day, that's the way it should be in any profession, right? And there's no shortcuts in ours either. And the way you explained why the comedians are leaving and not watching, that's too bad. That makes me sad, man. That's what they're running for. You're just a
Well,
squirrel on a treadmill, then.
maybe this conversation will change it. You know what I mean? Like it's got to
Oh,
start somewhere. I don't know. I feel like a lot of comedians, because
cranky old curmudgeon me.
I've had a lot of comedians though, like on this podcast, that are in like much higher places than myself or my peers are right now. So perhaps other comedians watch this and they go, "Yeah, you know what? Maybe I don't need to do 5 open mics in one night. And I can just do 2 shows and maybe watch a headliner and then get a lot more from it." Who knows? We'll see.
Yeah. Well, I know that watching the great Mike McDonald before I answered the call of stand up, um, it was an epiphany. It's
Hmm.
like, I went down to Los Angeles in the early 90s. I was there for 3 years when I was an actor chasing the sitcom dream, and I ended up getting commercials and things. And we went down to do a series that the wonderful actresses from Second City created, Deborah McGrath and Linda Cash, called My Talk Show. And they sold it to Ron Howard's company. And so that's what brought us down, a handful of us from Second City. And we were in Newsweek on Tuesday with our cast picture, nice big billboard on Sunset. Uh, this is the cult show you got to watch this year. We were canceled on Thursday. And
Oh,
on Monday, I was chest deep in a hole in Robert Urick's front yard, pulling a tree out with my buddy's father's landscaping company. So I'd worked for 11 months, just the howling wind of unemployment in paradise. And I remember watching the first HBO specials in those days. And I saw Dennis Miller's special, Black and White, before his voice became a Republican mouthpiece and he went as right as he did. But Black and White, his love of language and his scalpel sharp assessment of hypocrisy that the left is very guilty of was just incredible. And then the next one I watched was Billy Connolly, his first special. Whoopi Goldberg had seen him at the Edinburgh Fringe and she'd brought him over. And
interesting.
this tartan wizard threaded the needle and sang the song of his fractured tribe for 90 minutes. And it planted the seed of change in me that I knew I had to do that someday. I knew I had to at least answer the call of stand up. And it's so hard. I mean, I'm not saying that uh I'm not saying that because the younger comics aren't watching the pros that they're bad comedians,
Hmm.
because I know how hard it is.
I know you're
And I
saying it from
know
a
how
place
long
of
it takes to be
care.
good.
Your
Pardon me?
care, I know that it's coming, your anger for it, and I wouldn't even say anger, passion. Your passion about it is coming from a place of you care about this art form and you don't want to see the truest form of it get lost among the newer generation. And to you, it appears as if that's happening because these people aren't watching the people ahead of them. Like the only way to
I don't
learn is
want to
by
negate,
watching.
yeah, I don't want to negate their comedic point of view. That's not it. That's not it. I I just I just know what we did in our day, and it helps.
Hmm.
That's all. It helps. You
Hmm.
know, when I go to the Comedy Cellar and I see David Tell walk on stage at quarter after 12 at night and rip a room apart for 20 minutes without one profanity, it's remarkable. It's remarkable to see the best, you know. To
Truly.
see Louis C.K. at Massey Hall before his fall from grace years ago, it was just it was and the three people he had open for him, yeah. And to watch Bill Burr, I mean, these guys are the surgeons of the calling,
Truly.
and Seinfeld too, of course, is just remarkable. He's so good,
Yeah.
and he's so uh, specific, uh, and he so honors the craft. I remember years ago, before I was a comedian, there was a book out called Comics, and he was interviewed in it. Leno was interviewed in those days. He was just a comedian then. Letterman, I don't think he'd even had his show yet. Paul Reiser, those were the guys I remember being interviewed. And I remember they were talking about jokes being stolen. And Seinfeld said, somebody steals a joke, write 10 more. Right.
Yeah. It's all about
And
work
that's what
ethic.
Gordy Lightfoot said about writing a song, right? You know, you want to be a recording artist, don't submit 3 songs, submit a dozen.
Hmm.
And so it's imperative that um, there be a work ethic, just as legitimate a work ethic as anyone who's studying to become a lawyer or a physician or an engineer. And yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
that's the way I feel anyway.
Well, I agree with you. And there's another question that I always ask my guests, and I want you to think of yourself at 15 years old, like who you were
Yeah.
at 15. And the phone rings, and it's you now on the other end. You can give yourself a piece of advice. What
That's
do
a
you
great,
say?
that's a great premise. Oh,
Not going to change your life whatsoever, but it might be able to change his.
stop looking to other people to validate you and believe in yourself. That's the most important thing, is to follow your bliss, believe in yourself.
I love
Yeah.
that. Yeah,
Thank you. True, you
that's
know, I mean,
it
it's
is.
just one of those things that, yeah. And, you know, I mean, it's a wonderful and peculiar calling, this stand up.
Hmm.
And it's funny, my buddy's mother turned 96 years old a couple of weeks ago, and a few of us went out to dinner with her. Uh, and she said, I remember when you'd come to my house when you were 14 years old and say you were going to be a comedian. And then in the same breath, she looked at me and she said, you know, I never ever thought I'd see you as an old man.
I thought she was going to be like, and you're still not funny.
No, that wasn't there, but she said that she was wonderful,
uh,
you know. Yeah, yeah,
wow.
yeah. So I guess I had that in me, but yeah, but just don't depend on others to validate you. Believe in yourself.
Yeah.
That's what I
That's
would
so
do.
huge. That's a lot of people have that issue now too, of just always seeking that external validation. And you just really need to just be better
Well,
than you were yesterday.
well,
That's
that's
all it
the
is.
inherent contradiction with stand up, isn't it? We need the validation
Yeah.
from the
This is
audience,
true. Yeah.
right?
We need a little bit
Uh,
of it.
yeah, you know, but as you stay in the game uh, for a lifetime, and you're entitled to have your point of view, that may rock the apple cart with an audience. I mean, it's our job as comedians to rock the apple cart, not ride in it. Yet you don't want to lose the room. And if somebody's paid $70 to see me plus tax and come out of the house when there's all kinds of come out of the house, geez, sound more Canadian, Ron. Why don't anyway? And there's so much to keep you shackled to that lazy boy chair,
Yeah.
binge watching something,
Yeah.
and but you have to give them, like Keith Richards said, give the audience what they paid for. And when I hit the road again after the pandemic had lifted, it was a little window there before Omicron came calling, right?
Yeah.
And the theaters were half full.
Oh, I think I lost you there for a sec. Hold on.
And people were just so eager to be out of the house and sitting together again, processing the daily trauma of the life journey in the language of laughs. And it occurred to me that's what matters the most, is making those authentic moments matter. Everything else is just a spoiler on a Dodge Neon. And at the risk of being maudlin, uh, that's the soul note that sings for me with the work that we do. It's a wonderful blessing to make a living making people laugh. And I mean, the road gets old, you know. Jesus. I'm in Kelowna now, just in Oliver last night. Opened the trunk of the car, first time in 25 years. I left my luggage by the elevator
Oh,
in
Christ.
the other hotel. So I thought, all right, okay.
You're like,
I've
there's
been
a
on the
new
road a
bit.
while. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then, of course, it's important for everybody to find their unique voice in
Hmm.
stand-up. That's 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 where you want to. That's the sweet spot, and it takes a long time. I mean, I think I'm known for these alliterative runs and things in my work, and when I first started, it was always getting jumbled up. And what's nice about being in the game for as long as I have, I can pace my sets now, get a nice roll and pitch, and let it sit for a while, uh, and enjoy the moment,
Hmm.
and which is something I never did a long time ago. Mind you, I mean, you can still be humbled. I did the comedy bar for the first time to break in some new material 2 weeks ago in the Danforth, and Friday night was a great set. I had a lot of fun. Had 20-year-olds outside the club asking for a selfie. So I thought, okay, man,
Yeah.
I'll take that when the networks want to see anybody with white eyebrows walking is out the front door. I
Yeah.
thought, okay, that's cool. Then the next night I went up, not so much. I got that very familiar cottonmouth.
Oh,
And
that's the
it,
worst.
that's
Your
the
legs
worst,
start
you know?
shaking. You're like, is there an earthquake happening? What's going on?
No, but it's remarkable how integral the cohesion between the comedian and the audience is. It's symbiotic.
Hmm.
Laughter acts as the adhesive to the through line of thought.
Oh, I had a
Yeah, yeah, yeah. But you can't be afraid of the silences. That's
no.
for sure. But I don't find that there's much of a deference for um, historic context these days with clubs. I always like to set things within a historic context sometimes, and I don't know, but it's still imperative that you realize this calling, like life, is all about the long haul. And that's what Carson leans in to say to Steve Martin, right? When he kills. Carson
Hmm.
leans in and says, you'll use everything you ever knew. And I find that amazing that a man of his stature and would say that to Steve Martin, two iconic voices, funny for my generation. And that's a humility in the face of the work. Right? And it's like people who I respect have said, I went through Second City with some uh, very wise, very competent comedic actors. Deb McGrath, Donnie Lake, who's in the sequel to Spinal Tap now, wrote with Bonnie Hunt, had several series on down there, and just got off a Space Force with Steve Carell. John Hempel, who wrote with Eugene Levy in the old days and created Maniac Mansion. Um, and Mike Myers was in my touring company. I was a senior member when we picked up Mike up in Agincourt. He just finished his grade 13 exams and he hopped,
Wow.
yeah, he hopped in the van with a what he was the first time away from home, what looked like a child's suitcase, a case of Coke, um, a soccer ball, and the collected works of Harold Pinter. 18. And still here with all the success, he understands the magic of this work. It's alchemy. We're pulling gold from straw.
Hmm.
Where does it come from? What, where does it come from? You're always engaged in deducing the mystery.
Oh yeah.
It's
Just
that's what's so remarkably redemptive about the work. I mean, I found a tag the other night for a piece. Talk about my ADHD, you know? Uh,
hmm.
Geez, when I was 7, I was lost for 3.5 weeks chasing a friggin' bee. Then I'd run around the stage, right?
Yeah, yeah.
Well, I've got a piece now that I have on us being prisoner to our iPhones, believing that uh, filming fireworks on Canada Day is going to make far more sense watching it on a 3-inch screen 6 months later than watching it when it's really happening.
Yeah, yeah.
So I'm looking for my glasses, I'm looking for my phone, and I realize that I'm just chasing that bee again. And that landed in my lap. It didn't really sink right now when I told it to you, but it landed in my lap. And I thought, wow, that's wonderful that
Yeah,
that was
yeah.
sitting up there somewhere, ready to land after all these years, and act as another color to your palette.
Oh, it's the best. When something like that just pops into existence and you're able to grab it and use it immediately, it is such a phenomenal feeling.
And here's the other thing about stand up. Yeah. Are you doing it to get somewhere else, or are you doing it to make sense of the chaos we're all walking through in our
Mm,
daily march through life's bright fury? It, it's about the opportunity to make sense of the world and your place in it.
hmm.
Kurt Vonnegut more or less said that, the great Kurt Vonnegut. He said, look, go into the arts. It makes you human. And not everything, granted, we need to pay rent. We need to, if you're lucky enough to have a mortgage, we need to meet that. If you happen to have children, you need to feed them, which is why
Hmm.
I hit the road. I didn't want to be shackled to the feudal system of club work, never knowing when somebody was going to call me. And I hit my tipping point in Los Angeles with 83 commercial auditions before I got one. I didn't want that to be part of my life anymore.
Hmm.
I wanted to empower my life on my own terms. And that's what stand up does. It allows you to empower your life. And unfortunately, uh, it's also commodified. It's also monetized. And social media feeds this pernicious ruse that unless you're rich and famous, you failed.
Mm-hmm.
It's not true. It's not true,
No,
man.
I think you're
I don't
successful
know
just
how these
getting to
young
do
kids
it.
wear
Yeah,
that these
yeah,
days, you know?
yeah.
I, it- it's it's important to uh it's it's really important to be grateful for the gift of laughter, and that if it becomes your calling, you realize that it's a lifetime's worth of work.
Mm-hmm.
Never stops. It shouldn't stop because it's you.
Yeah, it's just you constantly expressing
Yeah,
yourself.
it's
Yeah.
you. Yeah,
Ron, I think that's a good place to end it for our listeners. If people want to check you out more, it's ronjames.ca
yeah.
for upcoming tour dates and
I
more.
haven't fixed up my website in a hell of a long time.
Okay, I
So your
think
best bet is to go to me and everybody else. So it's best to go to Facebook and to Instagram
Facebook
if
and
you want to
Instagram.
hang out. And yeah,
Right.
I think my book's in soft cover now. It's called All Over the Map,
It's
you
this one
know.
right here.
And yeah, there it is. Yeah, that's it. Yeah,
And
yeah.
it's also at the Ron James Show on Twitter, at Ramblin' Ron
I don't
James
do
on
Twitter
Instagram.
anymore, bro.
All right,
I
we'll X out of
I
that one.
packed that in.
We'll X out of that one then.
Yeah, I packed Twitter in. So it's Facebook,
YouTube?
Instagram, and my book. And I've been very fortunate. I've had a nice little show on 5 TV called One Man's Treasure. And for aspiring comedians out there, it's I started working with Five thanks to Nathan, who hired me. Nathan and Jonathan Torrance, who hired me for Trapped.
Mm-hmm.
Thomas Conway, a chap who was in my writing room, ended up creating that show, One Man's Treasure. So that's on 5, and I've had some great. I get to work with the great Pat McKenna, who plays my manager, and we had Catherine Greenwood in the show last year, Tony Napo, Aurora Brown, and her husband Chris Siddiqui,
Oh, I love
and
Chris.
we had and Paul Seon Young Lee. So it's a wonderful cast, and there's opportunities for people there, and I wish everybody the best of luck on this calling that you've chose and the road that we all wander in this tribe of solo acts.
100%. I thank you so much, Ron, for
You,
honestly
Johnny.
doing the show. I really appreciate it, and I know people are gonna love this episode.
Well, I hope it didn't
You're an
come on too
absolute
cranky.
you're an absolute legend in this industry,
Oh, well, buddy, you
here
just
and
do your
abroad.
work.
So
Thank you, Johnny.
I appreciate you.
Just do your work. Now we got to drive back to Oliver tomorrow to get my friggin' luggage. So I
Oh,
hope you stay on
nice.
the road long enough, folks, to forget your luggage in a
Yeah.
hotel room.
Get an air tag. All
I'll see you,
right.
bud. Maybe we'll cross paths sometime.
Yeah,
Yeah.
if I see you're in Ottawa again, I'll
I'm
definitely come
playing
out.
Ottawa next year. I
Nice.
got 20 dates in my Ontario tour next year that
Awesome.
start in October. So I'll be playing the center point in Ottawa, and I'll comp you and your girlfriend, and we'll have a
Oh,
pint
thank you.
show.
That's
Okay, bud.
awesome. All right, Ron.
Take
Take
care,
care.
buddy. Thanks
Take
for
care.
asking. Bye
Yeah, of
bye.
course. You've been listening to The Johnny Rogers Show. New episodes air every Friday at 8 p.m. Eastern Standard Time.